Hello all, and welcome to the back wall of my art studio. Today I want to discuss the meanings behind and the way I created my Bachelors in Fine Arts final art show. Okay. I have my earbuds in because I'm hoping that the audio through these will be better than the camera audio. This is what I'm working with today, so that's how that's gonna be. I am talking to people, but I'm talking to the camera, so this should be interesting because I'm not really used to this. I wanted to get cozy and just exist in a peaceful space to record this video, so I picked some flowers earlier today and have a drink, and hopefully this will go swimmingly. Knowing me, probably not, but it is what it is. I just graduated this spring in the 2021 spring term. Yes, and I am going to attempt to make a career out of painting. My main passion in life and what I live every day to do. I'm going to future me put up photos and videos here of what I'm talking about. So hopefully that all translates well. Hopefully. I guess I should just take it back to my road trip because that's kind of where the show began. I had no idea what I wanted to make my artwork about. The only thing I knew is that I wanted to do oil paintings. I fell in love with oil paintings in my sophomore year of college. It was the first time I ever had used oil paint, and I just couldn't look back. It was beyond my absolute favorite thing. The way the paint touched the canvas, the way that I could blend it, the way that I could layer it, which is probably the most important thing to me. And I was dead set on that, but anything else I had no idea about. So I just decided, you know what? I'm gonna pack everything up. I'm gonna free myself of any outside feelings and anything like that, and I'm really just going to hone in on what I want to do out of art because I've never done that before. All the art I've ever made is really just decoration, in my opinion, and I never made art that was just true to me, and that's what I wanted to start my art career out as. I spent about a month and a half on the road. I traveled with a friend. We kind of lived out of my car. We went all the way to California and back and stayed with some friends. And all along the way, we ended up stopping and picking wildflowers and having them dry out on the dashboard of my car. And we ended up having just a whole bunch of feathers we collected and wildflowers just sitting all along the dashboard of my car, which was super cool. And I knew that I wanted to include that in my show. I just didn't know how yet. I think right around when we were traveling through Texas, I started in South Carolina, so this was a good couple weeks in. We were traveling through Texas, and I had this idea in my head about a dream catcher. And I knew that I wanted to make a dream catcher out of the things we were starting to collect, going out in nature and just being present in a world outside of technology and being inside, and the typical classroom setting I had found myself in most of my life was really important to me, and I wanted to bring that into my work, and it ended up kind of pulling me through the whole show. So I started out with this idea of a dream catcher. After that, things started to fall into place. I journaled a lot. My friend would be driving. I would be journaling the whole time. After we got back, I had concepts of like 8 pieces I wanted to make, and each piece I wanted to do a sculpture with. I knew I was kind of getting somewhere, but I wasn't sure where. And then I started looking up other artists online that had painted similar concepts that I was wanting to paint, and I was printing out all these reference photos, and I was collecting materials, and I had all these, objects like feathers and branches from an old tree in my childhood backyard, and flowers I was drying, and mushrooms I was collecting, and it all just kind of slowly came together throughout the year. In the beginning stages, it was all just pages and pages of journaling. I had ripped out the pages of my journal and I had thrown them up on my studio wall, and I just kind of sat back and stared at them. And I was looking at my ideas. I was writing about my feelings towards certain things that had happened in my life and where I was at and what was really pressing on my emotions. I know for many people, artwork is an outlet for their emotion, and it definitely is for me. I just sat back. I came from that and I started sketching out what I wanted my paintings to be. Before I had left a friend's house, I'd actually done a photo shoot with her that summer. That was my first painting in my show. That is the painting Reasons Why You Love Me. And that painting was very pressing to me at the time, and it was really important to me because it, one, depicted probably the best friend I've ever had in my entire life. One of my first ever friends I had made, and someone that was very dear to me, and it also depicted a very hard emotion I was dealing with at the time. And I just felt very lucky to be able to paint my friend in such a way and her be totally accepting of my feelings. Also, work with oil paint in a way I'd never worked with oil paint before, which was very brushy. I had only done one portrait painting before. Actually, no, I had done two portrait paintings. I had painted myself, and I painted myself and my two sisters in one painting. So this was like the third time I'd really seriously touched painting a portrait. It was incredible. That was the first painting I started in studio for my show. It was just such a wonderful experience. From what I remember, it was August. I came into the studio really late at night, every night for weeks, and I, of course, was avoiding all my coursework for the rest of my classes. And I just remember going in and just staying as long as I could until the studio closed and just painting. And I would listen to, I think at the time I was listening to the band The Neighborhood. I just had it on repeat in my earbuds, and I was listening to like slow, lo-fi, hip-hop and pop music, just like really lend itself to the way I was making the brush strokes. The painting ended up being 3 layers. I just fell in love with it. I really pushed myself in a way with the color black that I hadn't done before in my life, and I've always wanted to do. So that was really important to me because I did want to stay true to myself with this show. So I use the color black a lot, which is fantastic because it is my favorite color, and I think I've always had a fear of using the color black in my paintings just because it is a hard color to work with. Also, I think there's lots of meaning behind the color black, and I guess I've just always been afraid of what people think. Still letting go of that every day. I'm trying. Tangents, yes. Anyway, that painting was just, it was an experience. I really fell into that painting the first month being back at school and starting my BFA show. The painting was hanging up on the wall. I had a dream catcher conceptualized on the other side of the wall and a whole bunch of just random materials, my notes everywhere, references. I looked at this rose that I had in a drawer in my studio space, and I was just looking at it, and I just pinned it up on the wall beside the painting, and I let it sit there for about a week. And I had some discussions with my mentor. I just kind of played around with the rose, and I was like, I know I want to build this dream catcher, but I feel like this rose is meant to be in this piece of my friend. It just made sense, like the colors fit together, the concept of a red rose for love and my love for her, and my thoughts on the difference between physical love and caring, and just all these different ideas that were kind of swirling around in my head at the time. I took the same thread I had used to kind of bind my dream catcher together, and I wrapped it on the rose, and I just hung it up in front of the piece, and I let it sit there for a while. And that's when everything really started to come together. I knew that I'm going to be using a bunch of collected material for one of my pieces. I had already put a rows in my other piece, and I was gonna build sculptures for everything, and they were gonna be bits of nature. So that was really cool kind of realization in the beginning. So after I finished the painting called Reasons Why You Love Me, I moved on to, I believe, my self-portrait. I knew that I wanted to paint myself painting, which I know has been done a lot before, but I wanted to do it in a different way. And I wanted the dream catcher to be included with that piece. So in my head, the dream catcher was a portal into the painting that I wanted to make. And so it just, all in all, made sense for the painting to be a circle. I thought up a lot of ways to make that compositionally work, and I ended up with this final product of the piece, which I think turned out really well, just compositionally. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the piece in the beginning. I thought of a bunch of wacky ideas. I ended up taking the canvas off the wall after my first painted sketch layer and physically cutting the skewed rectangle that was meant to be the canvas I was painting on in the painting out of the actual physical canvas I was painting on and sewing in a new piece of canvas. This I did for a couple different reasons. The main reason was because I was leaving a lip of each of my canvases raw. No gesso, no paint, no nothing. This was really important to me because a lot of the time people will ask me, how long do your paintings take? And everyone's curious about the process, and I haven't really brought anybody into my process. That's why I want to share more online. I just wanted to show that each of these paintings started out as this, tan piece of raw canvas, and then it's subtle, but you can see from the edge of each painting, it comes in and you can see the raw canvas, and then there's a little bit of gesso, and then there's a thin layer of the first layer of paint. And as the paintings come to the center of each of my pieces, there's full thickness, full detail paint. And that was just a personal choice that I wanted to explore. A lot of this show was just me exploring ideas that I've never been able to really explore before, and I'm not really sure if I'll ever continue with these ideas or not, but it was definitely a choice that I was pretty happy with. So I really wanted to take this idea that I was using for my show, for all my canvases to be raw edge, slowly getting more detailed towards the center, then put that idea into the painting I was painting. I hope I'm following this right. And so I ended up sewing in a new piece of canvas to represent the canvas I was painting on my painting, and leaving that raw edge and painting the inside with gesso so it matched all the other paintings, if that makes any sense. I just think it lent itself to the rest of the pieces in the show, which was really important to me. Also helped me further push the concept of, which I think I will continue to explore, which is what is paint and what is real. These kind of breaks of reality in the paintings, because when I paint, I am painting a fake reality, and so it comes to what is physical and what is painted and what is not real and what is real. That was a choice I used when I decided to cut the paintbrushes from the original canvas out. So the original canvas is overlaid onto the sewn in canvas, and so the paintbrushes I painted in are a part of the original canvas, and they are on top of the sewn in canvas, just to give a further sense of not just painted depth, but actual depth, because those paintbrushes would be in front of the actual piece in real life and what I work from for my reference photos. Taking that reference photo for that painting was probably the easiest shoot I had done for all of my pieces. Each piece I had done, I had taken the earlier journaling and sketching and went out and photographed so I could use my own reference photos to paint from. I think that is probably my favorite way to paint, is to take my own reference photos and then translate that through the material of oil paints, and so that's what I did. Yeah, halfway through painting my self-portrait, I definitely was starting to feel kind of weird about it because I was painting myself, which I had done once before, but in such a way to where it was mirroring what I was doing, which is obvious, I know, but I was sitting in the same chair I was painting myself sitting in, and it just started to get a little bit weird, and I'm still not sure how I feel about that piece, but it definitely was quite accurate. You know, I was in this pose, and I was sitting there just like kind of not slouch, but it just like in this really like relaxed, like methodical, I'm painting. It's very accurate to how I kind of sit. I definitely like get in some weird positions and then moving around a lot. Yeah, it was just kind of almost funny to do that. Conceptually, I don't want to really discuss too much in depth because I really would like everyone to just kind of, you know, have their own thoughts about my work, but I wanted to take the idea of the dream catcher and the portal into my painting and really think about, you know, what does the dream catcher mean to me? To me, I have always kind of slept with the dream catcher above my bed. I have chronic nightmares a lot, and honestly, the scariest thing to me in my day-to-day reality is the fear of others judging me and looking at me. This is me facing my fears right now and always, constantly as an artist, because I can't help but make art. I can't imagine existing any other way. And so I just constantly am having to fight those feelings and those fears. And that was probably the most abrupt way I could do that, was to let others into probably my, I shut myself off from the rest of the world and hide myself away to make these paintings. And I just wanted to, you know, have that be out there, go a step further and show how vulnerable that state is to me. It seems normal, I'm sure, to anybody else, but to me, I'm just sitting there being like so completely honest to myself and making these paintings. It's quite scary. It's almost revealing. It's like standing in front of a crowd completely naked. As I'm sure it is quite obvious, that is what inspired the painting within the painting, was me somewhat revealing myself, but also covering myself up and being unsure. Yeah, so I really like that piece, you know, a portal being led into my most deepest fears and a distortion of the dream catcher. It just all really worked together well. I was really happy to be able to have the opportunity to have the time to even make a piece like that. And I think I'll further explore stuff like that later on. Towards the end of that piece, I did make some last minute decisions. I ended up taking some of the still life portions of that piece and actually taking the physical things I had photographed and gluing them seamlessly onto the painting. So there's a thread coming down and actually comes down off the painting. And I took the painted portion and then I attached the thread with a little bit of Mod Podge, and then I painted along down onto the thread, so the thread kind of comes from paint to real thread to off the canvas. And the same thing with the rose. There's actually a rose petal glued on, which I put the rose petal on and then I painted a little bit on the rose petal, and so it's rose petal coming off the canvas, and the same thing with the feather. And then of course there's this slight 3D effect with the paint brushes overlaying on top of the new piece of canvas sewn in. So that's, I think, everything to do with that piece. And that was the second piece I had done. And I finished that about mid-December. So it was kind of a slow, climb at that point. I had finished one painting and most of the sculpture for the Reasons Why You Love Me piece. I had finished the entire painting and most of the sculpture for the Into Fear and Vulnerability piece. And I had photographed and painted a sketch onto the canvas for my Take Me Where I Should Go piece, which is actually probably my favorite painting I've ever done. It was the painting, I think, where I lent my feelings and also what I know I really enjoy painting, not just for anybody else, but just for me. And I probably ended up putting the most time into that piece, but it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like a chore or a job because I just genuinely enjoyed it, which is a good sign. But I conceptualized that piece and then asked a dear friend of mine if she would model. Thankfully, she said yes. And I took that dear friend of mine into a very cold river that had rapids, and I sat her down in that river and she froze for a good 30 minutes while we shot the photo shoot for that piece. So that was very kind of her. Then I just got to work. I knew I wanted her to be partially submerged. I wanted her eyes to be closed and for her to look at peace. This piece, I'm so often drawn to the water. Anytime I can be in water, I am that girl jumping in. I wanted to show I wanted there to be a sense of purity and peace. I wanted it to all connect to what happens when I believe I will die, which will be just the water will take me away, obviously. I knew that there would be a sense of risque that I am ever so searching for in my paintings. I wanted there to show the way the fabric clung to the skin when it was wet. That was really important to me, mainly because I felt like it would be challenging. And I'm constantly looking for that in pieces that I do. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to paint the white fabric, just because you don't ever really think about all the colors that are within fabric until you're sitting there and your eyes are kind of going crazy and you realize, like, oh my gosh, this white button up that I'm painting is totally blue in this one area. That is crazy. I get really excited because I have to figure out how to match that color, and it really carried me through the piece, and I knew it was going to do that, so no doubt about it, had to use a white outfit on her. I think the whole shoot came together. I had scouted out the area that we had photographed in beforehand. It was good. It was really, really good. After putting the sketch up on the canvas, it was during Christmas break, and I kind of just really threw myself into that piece for many, many weeks. And then in the middle of doing that piece, I bounced between that one and then a painting of my dear friend Chloe. That one was also a similar feeling, but in a different way. The piece Take Me Where I Should Go and Longing for a Reason are really connected in certain ways. All the pieces are, depictions of my emotions, but with other people in certain settings. But Longing for a Reason, I think, was more accurate to my current existence. And then Take Me Where I Should Go is more of like a fantasized existence that I have about death. Out of all the works, I struggled with Longing for a Reason the most. Mainly it was because the model I was depicting, I saw almost every day. We ended up living together for a while, so it was hard to paint her, but also see her, and it just never felt quite right. I never felt like I was getting her essence, and I'm still unsure if I got it, but I love the way the piece turned out, and she did too, so I guess that's all that matters. We ended up, for that piece, photographing in the bedroom I ended up staying in, right in the window. The background of that piece is actually my campus of the college I went to. So that's really cool. I'm depicting my friend being me in my life, I don't know, it was just so weird because I looked out that window so much, looking on a canvas, being like, wow, I really don't want to go to classes right now. And then I ended up painting my friend kind of in the similar vibe. I guess I'll start with what she's wearing. It's kind of important, I think, in all three of the paintings of the women that I painted, what they were wearing. Obviously, Reasons Why You Love Me, she's wearing a red nightgown that actually is a nightgown that I've had for a very long time and never wore. The Take Me Where I Should Go piece, the white button-up, kind of standing for just a lot of ways that could be taken. For me, it means a couple different things, but I like people to make their own assumptions about what the pieces mean to them. And so for the Longing for a Reason piece, I had my model wrapped up in a towel. And this was really important because I was depicting something very specific to me. The entire year, actually, for the most years that I was at college, I think I struggled a lot with getting up, starting my day, and really pushing myself just to be not even like a good student, but just a better person, to be productive for me. Often I found myself very stuck in this mindset of just like, I don't know, like, if there's a reason to even go on or continue. I definitely was very unsure the entire time I was at college if I was ever really meant to be there. In addition to what I wanted out of life and what I thought my reason was for being on this earth, or just any reason to get up for the day. It usually was like, I'd get up, I'd be like, okay, Abigail, I'm going to start my day now, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do that day. Go to classes, feed myself, feed my cats, do something that made me happy. And then it was a lot to just, I was like writing down in this list of things I needed to do something that made myself happy. That was a weird thought. Often I would get up and be like, okay, I'm going to do all these things today. And then I go and shower, and then I just feel so drained just even taking a shower, because I just I didn't convince myself enough that this was what I was meant to be doing with my life at that given moment. And then I just end up wrapping myself in my towel and sitting there just pondering everything and anything. Sometimes would just skip classes some days and just not go, and I just hide away in my towel. Like, that was it. That's what happened that day. I would just sit in my towel alone and be sad. And so that painting is almost that exact depiction of a state that I actually found myself in quite often, which is but there's water droplets on the window, there's water droplets detailed on the skin, and she's wrapped up in a towel, or her hair is kind of drying wet, and she's looking out, and there's like, I even covered the pupil of the eye. She's the most in the foreground, the model. It's very distanced in the emotion. And that is the piece the only piece that I actually did a full background. A very distanced piece emotionally and just visually, because it went past the window into this landscape area. So that was really cool. I knew I wanted to do mushrooms with that piece before I even started it. I knew I wanted something to do with rain for that piece when I was journaling about it, what I wanted to depict for myself. And so the mushrooms really lent itself to that atmosphere of right out of the shower and the moisture that I was creating visually with the paint. So that was really cool. Everything got dipped in Mod Podge, which when it dried, it gave this very shiny look to it. So all these mushrooms looked wet. And then the paintings looked wet because I did a high gloss finish on all of them. So everything almost felt like plastic, which kind of lends itself to this idea of painting these fake reality and then these real things, but they look plasticky and everything's very shiny and polished, but real, but also not real. So yeah. And then the final painting of my show, which is Hands of Reality, I went a little experimental with. It was the last painting I finished, and I finalized the entire sculpture with it day before I installed. But I was painting it and it was looking pretty good, but I just wasn't happy with it. It didn't feel right. What I was depicting, it just looked like hands pushing up against the light. When I photographed the reference for that piece, I had woken up early morning. The sun was coming through the blinds. I was staying with a friend of mine, and it was the right moment, right time. I ended up, like balancing my camera on my chest and taking upward angle photos. Like my timer was on the camera and taking photos of my hands pushing up on this fabric, trying to depict this like very distinct memory of mine. It's my earliest memory. But I was a young child and hiding underneath the covers, not wanting to go to school, I guess is a common theme. But pushing my hands up on these, on my comforter, so me doing that with the fabric and making this little tent for myself where it's like my own little world, and the dappling light is coming through, and you can see that in the painting in certain areas where you can see the kind of like the shadows of the blinds. I had this last minute decision to give the hands a certain effect. I had this experience when I was going on my road trip where there was like almost this very real disconnect with reality. And so I knew it's like a depiction of my hands. It's a depiction of my hands in my earliest memory. And it's also the thoughts about how, the only thing to connect us back to our own existence really is through the memories that we have. So I know that earlier, many, many years ago, I was a child and I grew up through these memories. So it's just all these thoughts that I have about current reality and existence. And I just felt like there needed to be, an element of not realness. Looking at my hands and seeing them kind of be something else. So that was the decision. I kind of just got really experimental with it outside of concept. And I kind of just had some fun because it was the last painting I was doing. And I was pretty sick of painting every day and trying to make sure I finished my full course load of classes in addition to that. Idea-wise with that piece, when I had photographed the reference for that piece, I think I photographed that in November, I knew that I wanted to do a sculpture that started from the ceiling and came to the floor because I knew I was already going to do it with the Dreamcatcher. I knew that I had the rose coming off the wall. I knew that there was going to be mushrooms suspended in some which way with the other piece, and I had already collected all the moss and was plotting that out in my head. And so it just made sense to connect the fabric to the painting itself and kind of have this bleed in. I think out of all the pieces, that piece, because it was more experimental, I was okay with how it ended. But if I were to paint it again, that's probably the only piece I really regret. Is I wish there was more blend in between the real fabric and the painted fabric. I sewed in some stays to where there's like pleats where the actual folds would go, but I definitely, if I'd given myself more time, would have, pushed that further. But other than that, I think it turned out really cool. The outside of the fabric, the natural element kind of came. How did it come to me? I was in the woods as I found myself to be maybe too often. And it was dandelion season. So all the dandelions were out and about, blowing away in the wind. And there's this just beautiful sense of fragility to dandelions that I loved. I think with all the pieces, what really made me feel right about the natural elements that I was adding for the sculptures was the color, and the dandelions were just the perfect color. And then I wrote about it, and conceptually the fragility of reality in my own mind, it just like all felt right, and it felt scary in a way because at any moment those dandelions could have just like poofed and then I would have been out of a sculpture. So it was kind of hard to handle that material, which I think really lent itself to the idea. But having the dandelions hang from the ceiling in front of the piece, be a part of the actual painting and kind of fall along with the curves of the fabric, I was really happy about. So regardless of anything else with that piece, I think the sculptural elements of the dandelions were probably my favorite just because they were really hard to work with and I think they turned out well. I ended up taking the paint from the painting that I was experimenting with, that like unnatural colors, and then putting it on the dandelions to connect them to, and then I ended up putting paint from all of my paintings, like the main focus color, onto the natural elements to have this bleed in of these real sculptural things, and then have the paint bleed onto them. And then from there, all of my paintings got signed with that same color paint. So for the Reasons Why You Love Me piece, after I hung the rose up, I ended up attaching rose petals and then making a sculpture where there's floating rose petals kind of coming down from the piece. So it's like a very top to floor piece. I wanted all my pieces to consume my viewer. I ended up, taking that very, I don't know, it's like it's delicious. That's the only way I can describe it. It's cadmium red, not to be eaten, but it looks just, it's so full of everything. And I put it on all my rose petals and then signed the piece with that same red to kind of pull the piece together. So I did that with all of the pieces. So the Longing for a Reason piece is signed with yellow, and the yellow's kind of falling all over the mushrooms, and the same thing with the Take Me Where I Should Go piece with the green. It's signed with the green, and the green's all over the moss. My self-portrait, Into Fear and Vulnerability, I have this like almost tan grayish color that I have it signed with, which I think just kind of went more with all the colors. That one didn't have a main color, but I think all the colors summed up together would have been that grayish. And then with the Hands of Reality, I used kind of all the colors. So there was that. Anything I didn't touch, I wonder. I think that's all I want to say about the pieces themselves. I'm unsure. Yes, that is all I want to say about the pieces themselves. Outside of all the studio time, I think each painting took definitely over a month for each piece. And then the sculptures, of course. Oh, duh. Threads of My Mind. That is what the show is called. So this came to me a couple months into the fall semester. I was winding all the elements of the dream catcher with my thread. I was winding the rose with the thread, and I was starting to really think about the sewing element of the fabric on my last piece. This thread, it has something to it. It's these ideas that are in my mind, my thoughts that I have, my feelings, and my paintings and my current existence are all intertwined. I guess that's the only word that can come to me right now. I just knew that the thread was starting to become a really important part of the show. Everything was bound in thread. Some of my paintings were sewn in with thread. All of the natural elements were wound in thread. It just made sense for it to be mended together in such a way. I guess just the threads of my mind. That's all I can really say about that. It's me. It's true to me. It's what's in my head, and that's what the show was. And this physical piece of thread really bound the whole entire show together. I guess that's really all I can say about that. Now, using thread, I guess, is a whole entire different story because, wow, everything got really tangled, which was fun. I think total install in the gallery, it took me about 3 days. It was just very methodical to just put in my music or whatever I was listening to and bring these ideas to life, because before I had installed the pieces, I had never seen them together. The dream catcher had never been put up before. The natural branch element I'd had hanging up on the wall for a while. I ended up soaking these tree branches for a couple days and then bending them together and then winding them together with thread. And so I'd never seen anything hung up before. So it was just really incredible to see it all put together in real life. And that was, I think, the most gratifying part of the whole experience. I was, thinking about making this show towards the end of my junior year of college. And then I'm getting towards the end of my senior year, my final year being at school, maybe ever. And it was just incredible to see almost a year go by and I have these thoughts on paper and now they're up in this space and they're reality and they're there right now, and I did all of that. So that was just beyond amazing. And, I think that was worth all of the effort that I put in and making everything. I love painting and painting emotion, and that show was very true to me. I'm not sure if I'll ever exhibit it again, but I was, felt like I needed to talk about it, so that is why I'm here right now. Yeah, Threads of My Mind, a look into some of the pieces, and, a look into all of the pieces, some of the reasons behind my decision making in those pieces. I will hopefully have some other ways to access that show. Right now it's on my Instagram at Abigail and Art. You're probably viewing this on YouTube at Abigail and Art. Hopefully I will have a website up at www.abigailandart.com soon. And yeah, 2 more painting, more ideas coming to life, and happily existing in cozy areas. Thank you all for listening. I think this will be the end of the video. And my cat Sherman is sleeping and he's the joy of my life. So if you ever want to buy a painting from me, or if you're looking for commission work for portraits, I'm your girl. Help support my child. Thank you all. Goodbye.